Hi, I'm Kent.
And I'm Anna.
And this is Film and Family, a podcast for professionals in the film and entertainment industries who want to experience deep joy and satisfaction in both their family lives and film careers.
Let's jump right in.
All right, this is episode 2 of Film and Family, this podcast, and I've got some notes here. We're going to just kind of jump into this conversation. I've been reading I've been getting on a little bit of a kick by an author, Christensen, super remarkable guy, and he actually passed away, I think, early this year. I think January of this year. And so Anne and I bought his book in honor of his passing because we'd read some of his shorter form literature, talks and different seminars he'd given. We bought his book, How Will You Measure Your Life? And we've been like totally enamored by the work that he and his associates from Harvard Business School and professional associates into these books. And so I finished it and immediately checked out the next book I could that was in our library system, which happens to be a book called Competing Against Luck, which is kind of a follow-up on his he coined the whole disruptive innovation thing, which everyone I think talks about, but no one actually knows the details and depth of that theory of disruptive innovation. So I really recommend going out and reading all of his books. I'm going to actually start from the beginning and read his Innovator's Dilemma as soon as I can. Anyway, so I'm reading Competing Against Luck, where he goes into more detail into what he calls the jobs theory, which what he says is a product is something that we as consumers hire to do a job. And it's not something that we buy because of a fancy. It's all about, why do people buy anything? Why do we do that? What motivates us? What compels us to make that decision? And what is the exact why? And he really has studied this his whole life. It was one of the biggest things I feel like he committed to write about. And so this whole book is about that jobs theory, and they have gone into massive amounts of data. They have tons of examples of how this works. And he defines a job as the thing you're hiring that product to do, but you only ever truly make the decision to hire that product because that job has to do with progress that you deeply want to see made in your life. Now, as I've been reading this, I've been really thinking about, how does this relate to film? That's kind of the question I've been asking, because when he writes about it, it doesn't feel like just like another, like businessy. I have a hard time really getting super businessy all the time. I think that some of us can relate to that. Like, we really want to make films, and not all of us want to be businessy people, even though I actually have found a lot of satisfaction learning about producing and the business side of film and the fundraising or like investment side of film and everything, because it does matter to me. And frankly, we're all trying to figure out, why do people buy movies? Why do they buy movie tickets? Why do they pay for subscription services? Why do we pull these movies into our lives? Why do we hire them? What's the job we want them to do? And he talks about, how do you find the answer to that? And he says one of the best, he goes through several ways, but the ones that stuck out in my mind, and I don't have any notes on that list that he gave in front of me, so I don't know the whole list, but he gives a few ways to discover where innovation is just waiting to be discovered. And he said, if you're looking for disruptive innovation, try and find a non-competition market where basically you'd be competing against no one if you created a product or service. And that's kind of what Netflix did. They were competing against no one. They were kind of competing against Hollywood video or Blockbuster video, and they were kind of competing against the movie theaters, but really Netflix was competing against, going out on a date or playing board games or reading a book. They were competing against, what are you going to do on your sofa? It's not the same. Like, you don't have to get in your car and go get something. So they were competing against no one, essentially. And everyone failed to see the disruption that was going to cause. And then now Netflix is in the MPAA. So they understood something about why people pull movies into their lives and how they could do that differently than anyone else ever did. And that actually is important for screenwriters and for directors, for people who are coming up with concepts, pitching. If you're a producer, pitching movies to investors, even an investor, we all need to understand, well, why do we do it? And why don't we do it?
Well, and I do think it's kind of empowering I definitely don't love learning the business side of everything, but once you do understand how it works, you begin to see how it's possible. And I think that that can be comforting and make it feel like it's not this magical, mysterious thing. It's, there's a process.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. Sometimes we do just think like, oh, it's hocus pocus, it's hit and miss. Sometimes people make great movies and no one ever sees them. And sometimes people make dumb movies and everyone goes and sees them and they gross over like $1 billion. I'm not going to name names. And so, I think we're always wondering that, but what this is supposed to lead us to isn't guesses and more guesses and more guesses. What I'd like to see happen in our careers, and I'm sure that we would all like to see this happen in our careers, is some sort of understanding. We need to come to a deep understanding of audiences, of people. Sorry about that fly that might have just flown right under our microphone.
Right by the mic.
Anyway, it's a nice place we've got here. Anyway, I just feel like, if there is any understanding that we can gain. So I've written up a huge brainstorm. I just scribbled it out because I had this, just profound, like I'm reading this book and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm answering his questions as he asks. And I'm like, yeah. And so I wrote down why people don't watch movies.
Which is another question that he recommends asking. Like, even a better question than asking, why do people buy a product is, why don't they?
And he said, look for places people are jerry-rigging products that aren't meant to do those things, and you might discover a whole new market where there's no competition. Like baking soda, they realized, Arm & Hammer realized people are using baking soda for way more than baking. And so they suddenly now do less than 10% of their revenue from baking soda and all these other things with the Arm & Hammer symbol on it. That's basically the main ingredient is baking soda.
I think I bought their toothpaste once.
Yeah. And so, they were using it to whiten their teeth, kill cockroaches and make things smell better and, make science experiments and whatever. So why don't people watch movies? And are people doing other things to take care of the need that movies might be better addressed to fulfill? So I was thinking about it and I thought, okay, people aren't going to theaters maybe because of higher costs, or because of COVID risk right now. That's the huge one, right? Like theaters are dead. And Tenet is trying to bring that all back, and Mulan kind of jumped out of the game. I mostly think that you would elect to see a movie in a different way because of inconvenience. Theater going is not the most convenient way to watch a movie. I thought certain people of certain faiths might not watch a particular kind of movie on Sundays. They'd rather watch something that feels more Sabbath day. That's something I grew up certainly experiencing and experience now. And I'm like, well, more than just to pass the time, I'd like to watch something on a Sunday that feels a little more observant of that day. And I think we can all relate to that, no matter who we are. What's something, if it's the 4th of July, we got to watch something that kind of feels like, maybe this is just me, feels like
the event or the
Christmas is a big one. People watch movies on Christmas. They don't want to just watch anything. Like it should have, especially if you have kids, even if you don't have kids, you want to watch something that has something to do with that because, I didn't write many notes on this, but now that I think about holidays, the reason we watch those kinds of movies on holidays is because we're looking for a certain feeling. We want to get some Christmas spirit. There's more on that later. We get into feelings. But I think we don't watch a lot of movies on Sunday because they're not the kind of movie we're looking for that in that circumstance.
And that's just one example. But what is the value of looking at why don't people watch movies?
Well, because those are all the people. That's the market that's not being tapped. I was realizing about myself, I was like, when I ask myself, why do I watch movies? I think that's important to ask, and we'll get to that. But I probably watch movies for really different reasons than a lot of people. And I think that's often why, this is something I've been observing. I think most people who watch the movies that I love are art house nerds. They're the filmmakers, the kids who are graduating from film school, or the people who have, maybe because of their parents or their own personal discoveries, like watching old movies, classic movies. They like actually reading screenplays or behind the scenes. They watch commentaries. They're film nerds. And so they want to watch something new and challenging and thought-provoking. Maybe they watch foreign cinema, old cinema, and so...
Well, they say that an artist is only as good as his taste.
Well, I agree.
You're only as good as your record collection. Some famous musician said that. I can't remember who.
It was probably... I won't make guesses anyway. But I feel like, so if I ask myself, why do I watch movies? Well, and there probably is an audience for people who watch movies that I like. And if I made a movie just based on my own taste, I'm sure there are other people out there who will watch that. And I don't think that that is something we should discredit ever. Making something personal, writing what you know. It sounds
even the movie
cliche.
you want to see.
Yeah, make the movie you want to see. The guys at Script Notes, Craig Mazin and John August, they tout that episode after episode. They said, don't write what you think people out there in the zeitgeist sphere really want to see. Like you could guess at that like a blindfolded person playing darts all day long, and you could just guess, and you'll end up with a stack of scripts that nobody really wants to buy. And so, and maybe someone will, but really it is, I think, true that you make the movie that you want to see, and there are people like you out there. That's one of the things about movies that's core to why I think movies exist, is that people making the art and the people consuming the art are all trying to find some sort of connection. And so when you write something that you want to see and you put it out there, it takes faith, but you will find the people who, well, hopefully that movie finds the people that also wanted to see that film. And so you experience that connection. But if you're trying to people please, sometimes people will go, I can see what you're doing and it's not working for me. They can see what you're trying to do, but you're not actually doing it. So anyway.
Yeah, I guess I'm still trying to figure out the purpose of asking why people don't watch movies. I guess if you're looking for a market that is sort of untapped, then you might find it that way.
Well, and that was like one of the realizations I think I was having, was that I was like, there's tons of types of people in the world. And there might be some people you'll just never get to go see a movie in a movie theater. Or maybe there's certain kinds of people that, like my mom, just can't sit for 2 hours without getting up and trying to clean something because it's just so doggone unproductive to watch a movie. Now, she did sit through lots of movies, and my family sometimes I feel like likes to say that they never watch movies, but they do, and they tell me about the movies they're watching. So I just think there's so many types of people who will or will not watch certain films or watch films in certain venues, whether it's buying the Blu-ray or DVD. Some people think that's going out of style, streaming it, going to theaters to see it, whatever, going and sitting in the back of a truck bed and watching it at a drive-in. There's so much diversity in modes, but also kinds of movies. And some people will just never watch horror films. It's just a fact. There's people who will die without watching any of them because they just don't like them. And there's people who won't watch, I don't know, black and white films or films in other languages or films where you have to read subtitles or films about certain topics or whatever. So I think that's why like each film is considered its own separate business. But the problem with that is that everyone is comping every movie to other movies like it, which goes completely against, in my opinion, one of the main reasons we do go see movies, which is to see something maybe we've never seen before or experienced quite that way before. So when you're trying to like say, oh, this is like Groundhog Day meets Romeo and Juliet, and then we go, okay, well, but we've seen both of those things before. We've heard both those stories, and so like
automatically makes it kind of boring.
I do think when people put that in a log line, that's just my personal opinion, but I don't ever get excited when I hear, oh, it's like that movie mixed with that movie. I always think, oh, that kind of dulls it down a little bit when we start comping all day long. Especially if it's like comping plots. That's the worst. Anyway, so honey, why do you think you watch movies? I don't know. Is that something you want to talk about?
Yeah, let's get into that. And I can't speak for everyone, but I do think that and this kind of answers the question of why people don't watch movies as well in my mind, which is I think that we all have this sort of striving for meaning, striving for things that we want in our life. And so there's something inherent in us that likes to watch or hear a story about a character who wants something very badly and is having a hard time getting it, because we all do that. And so I think naturally we're drawn into stories that follow that structure. But I also think when that thing that they want is something that we also can relate to, that really can attract us to a particular story. If we think, wow, this person understands me, or I understand them, or I want what they have, and maybe if I watch this film, I'll figure that out. And sometimes that's really not on a conscious level. It's like, you know, you might watch a film and be like, oh, wow, this person was like a nerd, and then they're so cool by the end. And maybe there's a part of you that feels like you're the not cool person and you want to be the cool person. I know when I was a teenager, I just wanted to fall in love. And so I just would watch these romance movies and be like, how do I fall in love? Like, maybe if I watch other people fall in love, then I'll figure out how to do it. It's sort of like...
This brings up so many problems.
It's just kind of a funny thing where I don't know if we consciously do it. And honestly, if I watch a film that I'm not interested in the premise initially, I still might get sucked into the narrative.
Can I ask you what were your favorite romance stories and movies?
You know, that was the thing, is I didn't find very many that were very satisfying. But I kept watching them because I think I was seeking. I wanted, and maybe I would pull little bits and pieces and say like, oh yeah, I want something kind of like that. Or, oh, it seems like this is how a love story might go. How will my love story go?
You know what I just thought of? So I think it's ironic, speaking of John August of the Script Notes podcast, my favorite love story ever in any movie growing up was Big Fish. Mm-hmm. Loved it. Anyway, just side note.
Oh.
I think that was like the one that captured the essence of romance for me. There, and yet it was done on such a almost superficial way. Not like, that's not a criticism. It was done on like a almost archetypal romance. It wasn't like this real raw, like, oh, like, you know, this is exactly how someone would meet and how they would whatever. It was like totally overblown romantic notion of like time literally freezing and he like brushes the frozen popcorn out of his face as he walks to her across the amusement park, and then it speeds up extra fast because like it has to catch up and then she's gone and he can't, and he never sees her again, and he just doesn't think he'll ever meet her. And then he works for like this Jacob and Rebecca story in the Bible where he works for months and months or years or whatever just to learn her name, and then he just goes through these Herculean efforts to
you
fall in love with her.
wanted it to be really hard.
I don't think I wanted it to be really hard. It certainly wasn't in the end. I just think for some reason that was just really romantic and it struck me in an interesting way. Not that it had any semblance to reality. It had a semblance to the feelings. Yeah. And that's what not always are we very concerned about that reality. We're concerned about feelings.
I think we think that we want things. We think we want to fall in love. We think that we want to be recognized. Whatever it is, we think we want money or fame or whatever. But really what we want is the feeling that we think those things will bring to us. And so falling in love is kind of a silly example because we think being in a relationship means we'll get to feel love. But
we can feel that without...
Yeah, you can feel that at any time.
Yeah. It's just the thoughts we think.
Lots of circumstances.
About people.
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting because that brings up some really cool principles about understanding how people actually work versus how we all assume will work, which is this idea that like circumstances will make us happy. And
that's sort of the wants and needs thing too.
Yep. In screenwriting.
There's like something that the character thinks that they want and they don't always get what they want, but hopefully they get what they need by the end, and that feels satisfying.
And so to bring that back to what people want, why do we go see movies? And I really do think that an audience is looking for an overwhelming emotional response when they watch a movie, like we just talked about. And I think that there's a few ways that I've thought about in terms of like how that's accomplished. I think a revelatory experience, like a big twist. I think one of the reasons The Sixth Sense just never dipped. That movie just made money weekend after weekend after weekend, and ticket sales just wouldn't dip because it was just this phenomenon. No one had ever experienced a twist that intense before. I mean, not since like Hitchcock was making movies, man. I mean, like this was like early 21st century cinema. Like I think it was the year 2000, right? It was when, or 99. Regardless, that was a revolution in filmmaking, screenwriting. Like that twist that Shyamalan pulled off. And pulled it off. Nobody guessed it. And comment below if you guessed it. You're like, I remember. But the point is that there's something magical and emotional about a cognitive revelatory experience where you're watching something, and then in a single moment, everything you've seen before up to that point in the movie now means something. It means something different. You understand it differently. You see it in a whole new light. You were just told an entirely new story about the story you just saw in 0 seconds. Like in an instant, a single moment, your brain just exploded, right? And you all of a sudden understand the last hour and a half or 2 hours of your life in a new way. This movie you've been watching. And sometimes that happens in real life. And it is an emotional experience when a powerful thought strikes us and suddenly we understand a difficult thing we've been going through in our whole, for maybe all day or maybe all week or maybe months or maybe years of our life. And suddenly you look back and you realize something new about yourself, something new about your life, something new about a relationship. And sometimes those twists are horrifying. And you realize that someone's been dishonest to you this whole time, or sometimes they're remarkable and you realize that your life has a deep meaning that you never saw before, and maybe all these difficult things had meaning. Either way, it's kind of an exciting, remarkable thing to learn the truth or to learn things in a new way. And so that twist is one way I think you get that powerful emotional response. I don't know. What do you think? These are theories of mine.
I mean, I don't think that we go into a movie thinking, I want to have a powerful emotional response necessarily, but we do feel that. I think we step into the theater hoping, I hope this is going to be good. Yeah, I think there's sort of the wants and needs of the audience as well, where the trailer sort of shows us what we want. We might think, oh, I want to be like that character. I want to fall in love and I want to be cool. You know, I gave those examples before, but like
Anna always says, I want to be cool. Because she thinks that's the only reason people watch Marvel movies. All right. Full disclosure. She just thinks that it's mostly young men, early 20s, teenage boys who are like, I just watch Iron Man and I feel so cool all day.
I do. I feel like
I watch Jason Bourne just cool. Beat people up and I just feel so cool. No, I mean, I remember walking around after watching the first Bourne movie when I was like 11 or something and being like, I'm so serious. I'm so straight faced like Jason Bourne. I'm so like Jason Bourne just matters more than all you little people who don't secret agent it up every day. I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of a thing. I could be wrong
about this theory.
I'll own it personally. That's probably why I watched Bourne and Marvel.
I'm trying to understand the appeal, but
I'm way too sophisticated for Marvel movies now.
Okay, stop.
I'm just way more nuanced than that.
Anyway, what was I saying? Wants and needs of the audience. I think there's something that we want, but if the movie really touches on what we need, we will experience some sort of a revelation or a realization. And I think that is what creates powerful emotions, is a powerful thought. But it's the journey that it takes to get to a new thought that doesn't happen in an instant. It takes a whole movie sometimes to see a character that you relate to who thinks a certain thing at the beginning of the film, and by the end, they think something different, and that's their arc. They've changed. And that one difference in the way they think changes the way they feel and the way they see the whole world, and it might do the same for you.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're wanting more information on the screenwriting process, we'll probably go into it further in further episodes. Script Notes dives into it like crazy, so I'd recommend that podcast. I would also recommend Khan Academy's Pixar in a Box resources if you're looking to get more into that. But that's not really, I mean, we'll probably get into those things just in terms of conversation throughout the show, because we do talk about and think about and read about and listen about screenwriting a lot. And so, but whether you're a screenwriter or not, a director, a cinematographer, an actor need to understand, I believe, all need to understand these things. And some of the most successful, I think actor is a hard one for people to maybe just, I'll speak for myself. I never thought actors were as involved in the storytelling process. And some actors everyone's different, right? But I found that many actors who have the longest lasting careers really do take seriously the responsibility that they have as storytellers. And they understand these principles that we're talking about. Why do people go see movies? Why do people care about stories? What is character, and how do you define that? How do you define character? A screenwriter really needs to know that, but an actor does too, and a director does, and a cinematographer understands, like, what is the frame that we need to construct to be able to tell this story, to be able to evoke these emotions. And so anyway, so I also think that one way that we get these overwhelming emotional responses is this sense of newness. I would call it spectacle. This idea of something you've never seen before, or a moment in a movie where you say, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Whether it's something like, I remember 2010 being a teenager, watching Inception in theaters and watching that hallway sequence. And these guys just tumbling around this hallway while gravity, quote unquote, is changing. It was a visual effect that looked so real because it was grounded in physical reality. It wasn't a digital effect. It looked so real. I think my mouth might have been open in the theaters. I was just like astonished, totally astonished by that moment. I just never seen anything like that. And at the same token, we watched Marriage Story several months ago. Man, and that fight where Adam Driver puts that hole in the drywall with his fist, and him and Scarlett Johansson are just like going at it, and he's just letting his heart pour out and just screaming, and it's horrifying. And it was so close to home that I think I felt uncomfortable. Not that we've had like divorce-like fights, but there was just something about like him expressing that level of anger and showing that. And I mean, I've definitely punched walls. So
it
anyway,
just did feel so human.
It felt
and real.
so human and real, but so imperfect at the same time that like sometimes we don't like, people think you don't like imperfect characters, but we all like imperfect characters. And like, but that was just that level of acting. He just went there, and there was a sense of spectacle to that. It wasn't Marvel Cinematic Universe. It wasn't visual effects. It wasn't explosions. Those are all spectacle, even though we've seen them a million times. That was spectacle for me. I was like, what? I've never seen a marital dispute quite like this before. Even just the whole process of the divorce. I think they really were like, for anyone who hasn't been through this, you have no idea what it's like. And we're just going to show you exactly what it's like to get a divorce and to deal with divorce lawyers and to go through that. And so many people that we talked to who were in relationships, whether they were married or not, maybe they're engaged or dating, they just would always turn to the person they were watching the movie with and go, we're not like that, right, honey? Like, we're never going to get divorced. Let's pass on that experience, right?
I think that's another cool thing about movies is that it really lets you enter different worlds and see what it's like in the domestic life of another culture or another time period or
just of another person who lives next door.
Yeah, like a divorce, that's a world that you enter sometimes. And
another couple is a whole new world. I mean, we have neighbors that live in front and behind and side to side. But boy, what do they do? What do they talk about? What do their dinner tables look like? I mean, I remember even just eating dinner with your parents when we were first getting engaged, and I don't think we were engaged yet. And I remember thinking, this dinner table experience is so different than what I grew up with. I grew up in this ridiculously loud, but we just take that for granted. We just assume that most people experience the same thing we do. Yeah. But what's so cool is that like, even though you're going to a different world, I don't think that the point of going to that world is escapism. It's not to get away from your reality and pretend like it's different. It's to go to a new reality. It's to go to a new reality and realize that it's the same. That these are people just like you, whether they're shy or outgoing, whether they're black or white or Asian or homosexual or straight or spiritual or not, or Catholic or a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It doesn't matter. that sameness, I think, is a big reason why I believe if we go and we're just totally transported, but we don't ever actually connect emotionally, if you're lacking that sameness. Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit, but like...
Well, could I share an example?
Yeah.
And we probably should wrap this up, but I think of Anna Karenina as the one that has popped into my head, and it's one of my favorites by Joe Wright. I think that's just a masterpiece, and it has this spectacle for me, which is this rhythm. It's almost like a musical, yeah, but it's not. They're not singing, but they are dancing to a degree, just because
almost it's choreographed blocking.
The movement has such a rhythm. Anyway, love that movie, and I think I wanted to see it because of the spectacle to one degree, because it just sort of enhances the emotion of everything.
The trailer is like alone is stunning. So evocative.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like I could kind of relate to this character a little bit. And by the end, I still felt like I learned something. Like it's really the story of Constantine and Kitty that I love. And that's, I talked about romance films, and I feel like that's sort of been my own experience of like growing up watching movies and thinking, oh wow, like, is it going to be this like passionate love affair thing? Not that it would be anything scandalous for us, but the media has all these portrayals of what that could be like. And then you see the end of the film, and it's like, for Anna, who has the affair, it ends really sad. And for Kitty and Constantine, who just kind of have what is sort of a normal relationship in my experience of just like, they become a mom and a dad, and they have sort of a humble life.
I mean, it's like as humble as, Russian aristocracy goes, but I mean, but there's a domesticity to the end that's quiet.
It's the contrast to the other relationship, I think, that gives you
Contrastine and Kitty.
Anyway.
So that was episode 2 of Dad Jokes. Anyway.
We better wrap this up.
So I really actually appreciate what you're saying about that you watched it and you felt like you actually did learn. It's that idea of understanding. And I think that understanding is something we talked about at the beginning of the episode from a business perspective. Why do people not watch movies? Why do people watch movies? How do we come to a deeper understanding of that? Mm-hmm. Maybe this episode has helped us get there. Maybe we've just talked. But I like to think that will lead to understanding at some point. But maybe that's also why we go see movies. We are seeking a deeper understanding of life, either, in general, which can lead to some pretentiousness, I think. Like, what is the meaning of life? Or on a specific level, like, what's the meaning of divorce? What is the meaning of love and romance? What is the meaning of this experience that I had that's very personal to me? And then you watch something and you go, oh my gosh, like this storyteller, this filmmaker, this actor, they get it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not alone, and I'm not the only one who gets this. Like, that's remarkable. And it takes such bravery and honesty for an artist to put that on the page, to direct it on the screen, to act it out. Ugh, actors that have to be so brave. And I think that that's something I realized. One of the reasons I go see movies, and you just said the same thing, Anna. I want movies to teach me something. And sometimes we say, no, but we don't want movies to be preachy. We don't want it to have a lesson. We don't want them to be too didactic. Well, it is why I go to church. I go to church because I want to learn something. And a great sermon is nice. But then have you ever left church, if you go to church, and felt like that just changed my life? Like, I didn't just kind of learn something like, oh, I didn't know that about Ecclesiastes. Like, oh, I didn't know that about, whatever. You go to school, you go to a class or whatever, and you go, I didn't know that about the Pythagorean theorem, But then sometimes you leave and you go, oh, I didn't realize that about life. I didn't realize that about what it means to be human. And, there are math classes, there are movies, there are church sermons where you leave thinking that. And I think that's really why we go see movies. At least I'll just be personal and say that's one of the reasons I definitely do. And I think an amazing movie can sometimes do almost the same thing that an amazing religious experience can do. You are looking for something that is almost transcendent, an experience, I should say, that's almost transcendent, where you feel like you had an idea about something, and maybe you kind of had the idea of the antithesis of that idea, and you're kind of trying to balance this, like, what is it, this or that? And then all of a sudden you realize it's neither. It's something higher. It's something I'd never considered before. That never having considered it before, to me, it's the spectacle. It's that, oh, like, I'd never seen that or understood that before. And so
sometimes it's even just the feeling of, I'm not the only one who's gone through this. Like, someone knows exactly how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes that's the realization you need, is that, like, this is kind of universal.
Yeah, and I think a preachy sermon, frankly, we think it's preachy because we feel like someone's trying to make a big deal out of something we clearly already know. And we feel like pretty much everyone here knows that already. And so...
But I also think we want to figure things out for ourselves. We don't want someone to just come and tell us. And when it's a story and we watch... we are kind of figuring things out and making our own conclusions, and
we feel like we are, yeah.
And applying it to ourselves personally, and it's not so in your face. It's like a little more natural. Hopefully
we've explored some things that maybe you've thought about. Hopefully we've added some new depth to the conversation you've either had in your own mind or with other people. And I would love to continue that conversation. If you would like to comment or message us, you can email us at films@invisiblemansion.com if there's something you'd like us to touch on, questions you have, or just thoughts you've had on the episode. We would love to get your participation and further and deepen our understanding of these thoughts and questions. And I'm sure we'll be touching on these things in more detail and in other ways in the future. So
yeah, come visit us, invisiblemansion.com. Thanks for joining us today, and good luck with your films and your family.
Bye.
Bye.